All right, we have so much beauty to cover, so let's hit it. Just wanted to overall show you the structure of Matthew again and where we are. So we are squarely in the Genesis portion of Matthew's gospel. So this is the first of 5 major sections. It's a narrative and discourse. And in this section, we are now at chapter 5, which begins the most amazing sermon ever given. And I can't wait. So, chapter 5, verse 1. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, remember them? He went up on the mountain. After he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying, so this is easy to just kind of skim over, but this is a major buildup. This is what's happening here. It's a big buildup and also a very weird audience that we're supposed to say, my goodness, these are the people he's talking to. Who is the audience? We learned from the end of chapter 4. The crowds were people that came from all over the place. They're Jewish people, but they came from lots of different places, and they were sick and lame, many of them. Some were demon-possessed. These people are the outcast of society. They're vulnerable. And there were at least 4 disciples there with him. They smell like fish because they were recently fishermen. So this is the people he's talking to. So what's Jesus gonna do going up in this mountain and talking to crowds of this kind of people? And here's the buildup. He's going to a mountain, and in scripture, when an important prophetic figure is going up a mountain, that's a theme. That's like a motif. And you're supposed, bells are supposed to be going off. Like, oh, this is an up the mountain incident. In particular, what is one of the first times we see this major incident of going up a mountain is in Exodus. This is Mount Sinai, Moses going up the mountain. This is where he encountered the burning bush. It's where he spent 40 days with Yahweh while the people are wondering what happened to our leader with all these flashes and smoke going up on there, and he received the 10 Commandments, received the blueprint plans for the tabernacle. So going up the mountain is an important motif. And like right on schedule, Google is making me sign in. It only happens once a week, and it's right now. It's like so interesting. Thank you, Lord, for this little experience. So now that he's up there on this mountain, what's he gonna say? This is Jesus, this is the Son of God. We've just read about his miraculous origin, his encounter with the devil in the wilderness. So he's passed a test that seemingly nobody else has been able to pass. And he's healed all these sick and lame people, and now he's going up a mountain to speak. What's he going to say? And what follows are what scholars and church people call the Beatitudes. And that's just a word that is kind of riffing off of the blessedness or happiness. And so when this word we're gonna look at in a moment, it doesn't really mean you will be blessed if you, at least not for the first few of them. It means you're already blessed because. So just keep that in mind. And then following these 9, there are a couple of illustrations which you can combine into one thought of the identity of the people that he's talking to, their true identity. He's re-identifying them. So Beatitudes, this is not how you can be blessed, but he's saying to the people who are listening to him, this very interesting audience, let me explain the kind of people who are blessed in this moment and why. So we use this term a lot. Have you ever just kind of been in a moment, maybe with your family, or maybe, if you've gotten a new home, or you're just in this vacation moment, or you're just thinking about the things that are going well in your life, or maybe you have good health at the time, and you're like, you know what? I am blessed. Have you ever said something like that? That's the sense that this is being used as, wow, you know, I'm really blessed. Some people would say, I am so lucky. Or others would say, man, I am in such an enviable position. And that's the sense that this is being used. Now, what's the message that people are responding to here? Jesus has preached. And he's preached the same message. Matthew is kind of uniting them with this message, is turn around, because the kingdom of heaven is where? It's at hand. It's at hand. It's a very strange message to our ears. We wouldn't figure Jesus would say that. We'd say, turn around so that you can go to heaven. That, would be less disorienting to us. But Jesus and John the Baptist both, they're saying this strange thing, turn around because the kingdom of heaven, hey, it's at hand. What does that mean? We're gonna find out in the next 12 weeks. So we are gonna look at these Beatitudes. I just wanna let you know there are many layers to them. This is not, this is what it means, this is only what it means, there's nothing else to really get from it, and then move on. That's just not the way the Bible works. It's certainly not the way Matthew works, and for sure, not the way Jesus speaks. When Jesus speaks in any of the Gospels, and in Matthew in particular, he is not just saying one thing. We're like, the way we read, the way we're trained to read, the way we're raised to read in this culture is like tic-tac-toe, is we've got the rules here, we've got the categories, and here's an X here, an O here, an X, oh, you know what? We cross the X is one, now we move on to the next tic-tac-toe. And that's the way most people read things. It's just the way, society is. What Jesus has done, though, is he's not playing tic-tac-toe. He's playing three-dimensional chess. So the board's expanded, and there's multi-dimensions to it. And this is so that we can reflect on these words for a lifetime and be fed spiritually. And this is exactly, the Beatitudes are just a prime example of this. There are a lot of different ways that Jesus is speaking about this here. One of the things we could reflect on, we're not gonna spend much time on, is the literary strategy that Matthew has in laying out Jesus's words in the Sermon on the Mount, particularly the Beatitudes, because we will find in the next 23 chapters, Jesus living out the things that he tells people they're blessed if they are. Many of those things. Another one is we see that Jesus is just upending what it means to be you're blessed, because there was already kind of a meme, it wasn't a meme, but there was already kind of a way of talking about how people were blessed by religious teachers and rabbis. Ben Sirach was a famous one from about 100 years before Jesus. And they would say, you're blessed when you, and then fill in the blank. Some of them really cool, like you're blessed when you follow the law. A lot of them were like, you're blessed when you stand up in a crowd and everybody listens to you. You're a blessed person. Or you're blessed when you have friends that all come around you in the time of trouble. You see what I'm saying? And Jesus's you are blessed whens don't look hardly anything like the traditional ones. He's just totally upending everything. And the thing we are gonna concentrate on a little bit, because not too many people talk about this layer, and so there you go. We're giving you something that it's hard to find elsewhere, is he's meditating on the Torah with these Beatitudes, and specifically on the 10 Commandments. So just as Jesus is on this mountain, Moses was on a mountain receiving 10 Commandments. These are not reinterpreting the 10 Commandments, but they're reflecting on the wisdom behind the 10 Commandments. Let's start with the first one, verse 3. When you're totally spiritually bankrupt, you're so blessed. You're blessed. Kingdom of heaven is yours. What is he talking about here? What does this even mean? All right, the word blessed, makarioi in the Greek, this is, you're in great shape if you are, or you're doing so well if you are poor in spirit. So, all right, here's this upside down view that ends up being a perspective from God's space, from where he's standing. This is his perspective. It's kind of like looking at the back of a tapestry. And this particular one is a meditation on the first commandment. And the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. So thinking about that commandment a little bit, the way I think Jesus is inviting us to look at it. Why is it that someone would worship a false god in the first place and put some other god before Yahweh? It's because they feel a spiritual lack. They feel spiritually impoverished. And they're looking for, I gotta fill this void now. This Yahweh person seems to, be making me wait, and I don't want to wait. This was the issue with the humans in the garden, is God said, no, don't eat from that tree of knowing good and evil, don't do it. And they're like, why should we wait on him teaching us these things? We can just grab it for ourselves right now. I mean, this chaos beast is telling us. It seems like a good idea. And this is the same thing that happened at the base of Mount Sinai, same kind of thing. It's set on analogy intentionally in scripture with the golden calf. Moses is up there for 40 days. And they're like, oh, who knows what even happened to him up there? We don't know, it's scary up there, and we're alone. And we need some kind of spiritual nourishment here. I know. Aaron, what do you think? Well, just give me your gold and they make this golden calf. Now this is a spiritual idea they can wrap their minds around. This was culturally appropriate. This was something everybody did, worshiping an idol to represent whatever God it was. This is the God that led you out. They were spiritually impoverished, and what they did with that spiritual impoverishment was create a false God, which is, the Lord is saying, no, don't do that with your spiritual lack and your spiritual need. But here you are, pretend you're the audience listening to Jesus. Remember, you'd been sick, lame, skin diseases that excluded you from the community of Israel, demon-possessed, and Jesus has come through and he's made things right for you, and you're like, whatever you want to say, Jesus, I'm open to now. It's like, they're spiritually impoverished. It's the nature of the community that they couldn't participate in the spiritual life of the community. And Jesus is like, no. You're so blessed that you're in this condition. You know why? Because what I've been preaching about, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, you get to be among the first ones to participate in it. It's yours. Isn't that cool? I don't know, maybe I'm just being a nerd. So it means they know they're spiritually lacking, they have a great spiritual need, and this is like practically everyone in his audience. Those who are allowed in the spiritual community probably felt unwelcome because of their condition. Jesus doesn't say, oh man, I'm so sorry for you, I pity you. He says, no, you are so blessed. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. The ones who up till now consider themselves spiritually bankrupt and others considered spiritually bankrupt, they get to receive Jesus's the greatest sermon ever preached in the history of the world. And they're sitting there. They've come to him. They've gathered at the mountain to hear the one who's greater than Moses. And they're the ones who are going to become, or invited to become, the kingdom of priests that Yahweh always intended Israel to be. They're not going to have any other gods before him. Verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Second command is, thou shalt not make any graven image. So in the ancient world, idols were a representation of the deity in physical form. The reason that you made and worshiped idols was when you needed help, or when something went wrong, or because you wanted to prevent something from going wrong. You wanted to either reverse grief or avoid grief. And that's why you appealed to deity. You could bribe the deity through the idol. And bad things either wouldn't happen, or if something bad was happening, maybe if you bribed the deity enough, they would listen to you and reverse that. And so what does this have to do with mourning and being comforted and the second commandment? The key to understanding is looking at the long form of the commandment. In Exodus 20, verse 4, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. This is the key part here. But showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. So it implies, let's get to the part that we all like, what? That idol worshipers hate God. So therefore they're going to be punished for up to 4 generations. Worshiping idols then becomes this self-perpetuating thing, because if people are being punished for great-grandma's idolatry, there's no appeal to Yahweh. This is just a grief trap, right? At least this is the way people thought of it. But Jesus actually knows the Bible better than they do, and he knows what this really means. Joseph, remember Joseph in Genesis? You know, the story of Joseph, Technicolor Dreamcoat Joseph. Remember that dude? Okay, remember what he went through? Oh, it was awful. He was thrown into this pit, multiple pits actually, sold into slavery to Egypt by his own family. It was awful. 4 generations before him, who was it? It was Abraham. Remember this one thing that Abraham and Sarah did? They had this Egyptian slave, and it was like she fell out of favor. I mean, it's a very complex story. It's so cool. And what did they do? They took this slave that they'd been given when they were in Egypt and cast her out for oppression. So now 4 generations later, here's Joseph going through the same thing. He's suffering the sins of his, the 4th generation. Doesn't that seem totally unfair? It seems unfair. But what did Joseph go through that for? To save his family. This wasn't a waste. Oh, Joseph, you're going to pay for somebody else's sins and nothing good's going to come of it. He took on the punishment of his family in order to rescue his family. Blessed are you who grieve, and he was grieving, because you will be comforted. So this is what Jesus is planning on doing. This is like foreshadowing what Jesus is going to do in Matthew. Joseph did it in miniature. Jesus is doing it in a big scale. He's going to bear the pain so the love of Yahweh can be shown to all. He's going to pay for the sins. You see what I'm saying? So if you're mourning for some tragedy or misfortune in your life that you think resulted from maybe your sin or the sin of your ancestors, oh, you were so blessed. You're blessed because comfort is on its way. And the comfort is speaking to them. Isaiah 53 spells it out. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. This is a resolution to what God always intended with this 3rd and 4th generation thing. The people who have responded to Jesus are people well acquainted with grief, but they're among the first citizens of this inaugurated kingdom of heaven that Jesus is talking about. The comfort is boundless. All right, verse 5. Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. And this is Jesus' meditation on commandment number 3. You shall not misuse or bear or carry the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses, who misbears or miscarries his name. And this has so much more to do than just saying, the name God flippantly or OMG. It's much more than that. It has to do with living a lifestyle that does not match your label. It's carrying his name. And the meek or the gentle, this is meaning those who, they might have the power to overcome with violence. They might have that, or they might have the power to vindicate themselves, but instead they exercise self-control. They exercise restraint. So what does it mean to bear God's name in Jesus's universe here and what he's trying to explain? The next 2 chapters will explain that, spell it out. And if they do, if they follow this, they're going to end up inheriting the earth, inheriting the whole earth in a foreshadowing way in this kingdom of God arriving, which I just want to introduce this phrase to you if you haven't heard it before. It's like, wait, kingdom of heaven, it hasn't arrived yet. You know, the world is still all screwed up, so how could it have been at hand? Jesus inaugurated this time we call the already, but also not yet. So something amazing has exploded unto the world. This life has exploded unto the world, but it's not yet fulfilled. It's not yet complete. And Jesus had this very much in his mind. Ultimately, fully, it gets fulfilled in the renewed heavens and earth, which we find at the end of book of Revelation. So those who restrain their power to retaliate and self-promote, this is the gentle, the praes, are the ones who carry the name of Yahweh well, and they will inherit the earth. You ever be like, okay, well, who cares about that? I don't want to inherit the earth. I just want heaven, dude. Earth, that's gonna burn. It's all gonna burn. What does Jesus even, maybe it's just temporarily, you can inherit the earth, but you gotta be bold and violent to get more. I don't know, what's it mean, inherit the earth? I probably shouldn't just spend like 2 minutes on this, but I'm going to anyway. The future state, eternal state of believers in the minds of the authors of the New Testament and in the minds of everyone that believed in resurrection, the Second Temple period, was not you're floating on a cloud. That just wasn't it. Yes, for sure, the New Testament teaches in 3 places, 2 for sure, that when you die, you are with Jesus. And where's Jesus? He's in heaven. So yes, for sure. When you die, that's your immediate future. It's awesome. But that's not the thing that they got excited about. That was like what they really were excited about is not what happens immediately after you die, but what happens after you die. And that was the resurrection and the new heavens and the new earth, where somehow heaven and earth get renewed and what was separated comes together. So being in heaven and being on earth somehow starts to mean kind of the same thing because it's all made new. And you have a resurrected body like Jesus's resurrected body. So you'd be just like him in terms of, touch, feel, eat, all of that, but it's eternal, it lasts forever. That is simply what the New Testament believers taught. The Greek philosophers wanted nothing to do with that. And in the church, it's like, let's just focus on the heaven bit and not this, resurrection bit. That's weird. We'll leave it in there, but man, it's just hard to swallow. But for them, it was not hard to swallow. That was everything. If you had told one of the New Testament writers that, no, what I believe is I'm just going to be in heaven forever, like after I die, and they'd be like, well, but what about the resurrection after that? And you'd be like, oh, I don't know. I'll still be in heaven. And they'd be like, you mean like hanging out with the seraphim? Is that what you want, really? I mean, I guess that's fine. But have you read Revelation 21 and 22? There's a new heavens and a new earth, and it's like a bride, the new Jerusalem's coming down, and you don't want to be a part of that? And be like, I don't understand all that weird Revelation stuff. You see, we're kind of, but blessed are we for not knowing all that because it's spiritual impoverishment. It's so awesome. We're gonna, anyway. Okay, verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for what? Righteousness. Every time you see the word righteousness is what I want you to think, because it's a church word. Righteousness means doing right by God and doing right by other people. That's what it means. So blessed are those who hunger for and thirst for doing right by God and doing right by other people. They're going to be satisfied. So the corresponding commandment is honor the Sabbath, keep it holy. Keeping the Sabbath to Jesus is not about a legalistic rule. It's not primarily about getting personal relaxation. The wisdom behind the Sabbath, even originally, was about letting the people, it's about sacrificing one day of striving for yourself, making ends meet for yourself, and sacrificing it, instead trusting him. Letting the people that you rely on to do the same. Take that day just to focus on God. And it's a weekly reminder to put myself aside and do right by God and others. It's righteousness. So in the experience of Jesus' audience, the elite, including the religious elite, they observe the day as a personal holiday for themselves, but they do not do right by God and others. They still expect to be served, right? Their servants still have to serve them. And these people in Jesus' audience have been on the receiving end of injustice, and they've observed and participated in unrighteousness their whole lives. They hunger and thirst for a world where people do right by God and right by others. And Jesus says, man, you're so blessed that you are thirsting for this kind of justice, because part of this arriving kingdom of heaven is hunger and thirst will be satisfied. Every day with Jesus is a Sabbath of doing right by God and doing right by other people. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful. Oh, I love that word. For they will receive mercy. Okay, commandment number 5, what is it? Honor your father and mother, that thy days may be, I like saying thy sometimes, that thy days may be long on the earth. Human tendency is to usurp the authority of parents when it's my turn now, right? Parents, you've had your day, you've had your generation, it's my turn, I'm taking over. It's just, the way it goes in life. The 5th commandment is about keeping that same honor going with the promise of long life if you do. So to be loyal, to be kind, to be honoring, to be loving in a persistent way over time. There's a Hebrew word for that. It's the word chesed. Everybody say chesed. Isn't that fun? The Greek word that translates chesed and is used here is eleo, which is usually translated mercy, but it means so much more than that. It's loyal, kind, honoring, loving, faithful, trusting, beautiful love. It's so many things. If you read the book of Ruth, we did 7 weeks on it. It's a study on chesed. That book is a meditation on that one word, really. The audience that is listening to this, they're poor, they're sick, they're lame, very recently possessed. So how did they get there? They probably got there, many of them, with sons and daughters and relatives who showed them eleo. And the massive inconvenience of taking a sick mother dozens of miles to see Jesus is true chesed, isn't it? Such are blessed because that's exactly what they're going to receive. They're going to receive the same chesed that they've shown. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Jesus is going to elaborate this and more in a little bit. But the 6th commandment is thou shalt not kill, or murder, really, the Hebrew. And this is the thing that drove Cain from the land of Eden to a land of wandering. Cain gave in to sin that was crouching at the door of his heart. So to be impure is not just about committing the act, but to harbor hatred and bitterness and anger towards God and others. So there's such a thing as ritual impurity that all these people had experienced, which is spelled out in the Torah, especially in the book of Leviticus. Ritually, certain ritually impure things could not enter into the presence of God as a symbol of our hearts which were impure. But heart impurity, according to Jesus, is what the real issue is. Ritual impurity is a symbol. It's to represent so you'll remember. Heart impurity is what is the big concern. And it's not just Jesus who thinks this. In the Old Testament, they didn't realize this. They did. Who shall ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? Well, you would say, well, the one that's followed all the ritual rules, right? Now they can enter the tabernacle? No. Psalmist says, the one who has clean hands and a pure heart. Pure heart. Clean hands, kind of like clean conscience. Psalm 24. So the people listening to Jesus, they've been ritually impure. Just their sicknesses and illnesses and demons and so forth have made them ritually impure. But Jesus tells them that's not what matters. The purity God cares about is not whether you've touched a dead body or wear clothing with two different kinds of fabric. I mean, these are all the ritual impurities. It's not, those are symbols. It's not what God's getting at. They're symbols that God cares that the impurity of unforgiveness and hatred just doesn't stay in your heart. So who can ascend the mountain of the Lord? Meaning who can see God face to face? People who forgive because they're pure in heart. They've not committed murder in their heart through unforgiveness. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Commandment number 7 is you shall not commit adultery. Adultery divides what God intends to be one. Worshiping a false god is like spiritual adultery because it divides the relationship that God intended for himself and for humans and brings in a third party. Adultery is all about bringing division in the marriage relationship, which is a symbol of the divine relationship. Peacemakers do the opposite of division. They do the opposite of what adultery does. They bring divided people together. They make two one. They reconcile, they encourage others to do the same in human relationships and their relationships with God. So to be just being peaceful, that's a passive thing. I'm just chill, right? But peacemaking, that is not passive. This is not what he's talking about. He's not talking about being passive and chill. It's actively making peace. It's an active pursuit of reconciling people with one another. And they'll be called sons of God. Those who get and implement God's priority of peacemaking and engage with it, they're the ones who are God's family because they've got the family trait of reconciling. It's not a reward, it's a reflection of their identity. So being called sons of God is just a statement of reality. It's not like here's your ribbon. I like what Anna Case Winters says. There's no promise of reward for the work of peacemaking. Rather, this work is simply an expression of our identity as children of God. It's a result of being in an intimate and imitative relationship with God. Children of God are those who act like God acts. The God whom we have come to know in Jesus Christ is one who is reconciling the world. There should be something of a recognizable family resemblance among the children of God, just as we might say of someone, he has his father's eyes. How would it be if we looked with God's eyes upon those with whom we differ? Looked with loving regard, compassion, as one, as God described himself in Exodus 34:6, who is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. Perhaps then we could dare to say, the hostilities stop here. Verse 10, are you uncomfortable yet? I mean, Jesus, he's doing this on purpose. He wants everyone that's listening to be uncomfortable. Verse 10, and you know what? You are so blessed. When you've been persecuted for the sake of doing right by God and others. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, 8th commandment, don't steal. Taking something from someone else and that thing doesn't belong, when that thing doesn't belong to you, that's an act of injustice against that person. And Jesus is now reflecting not on the person committing the injustice, but the one who's had that committed against them, the victim. So if you're a victim of this kind of theft that is talking about in verse 10, oh yeah, you are so blessed. So anyone listening who is treated unjustly for doing right by God, doing right by others, they've in a sense been a victim of theft. The poor and the sick are so easily taken advantage of. Imagine doing the right thing. You're paying your taxes, and then the tax collector falsely accuses you of paying with counterfeit money and confiscates all your property. This sort of thing happened all the time. And Jesus, his audience experienced this. When they have tried to live right, the wicked use it against him. Being vulnerable just put you in a position where this happened. They're chumps, they're suckers, they're impoverished for doing right by God and others. And Jesus doesn't say, poor you, poor you. He tells them, oh man, you are so blessed that this happened. You're in an enviable position because your need drove you to me right here on this hillside. And the arriving kingdom of heaven, it's yours. This is a weird way of looking at things, isn't it? It's so beautiful. Verse 11, blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of things of evil against you because of me. Rejoice, be glad. This is going along with everything he's been saying. For your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. All right, so 9th commandment, don't give false testimony against your neighbor. Again, Jesus' focus is not on the person who falsely testifies, but on the victim. Jesus points them to what they can expect in the future by being Jesus' followers. They're going to be the victims of slander because of Jesus. This is going to happen to them. And Jesus reiterates the blessing by telling them to rejoice, be glad. Heaven's rewards that are being stored up for them are greater than the slander. Think of how revered the prophets are. But in the prophets' own day, they were slandered, weren't they? And Jesus is telling this ragtag group of outsiders and outcasts and fishermen, you guys, you're gonna have the reward and reputation of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Elijah and all these prophets. And now, as if that's not strange enough, you, remember who he's talking to? You're the salt of the earth. Now, if the salt becomes tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It wouldn't be good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by people, but you're the light of the world. A city set on a hill can't be hidden, nor do people light a lamp, put it under a basket, but on the lampstand. And it gives light to all who are in the house. Your light must shine before people in such a way that they can see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. Commandment number 10 is not to covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. And Jesus sees coveting, it's a function of envy, obviously. Envy is seeing someone else's, they got this salt life, they got this great reputation, and I wish I had that, right? Why can't I have the salt life? And to those who are listening to Jesus that day, envy would be ridiculous. They're the flavor of the world. No other life will satisfy them now. And the people who live in luxury, they have tasteless lives compared to them. They've been healed by Jesus. They're in the presence of Jesus. Dude, this is the salt life. We thought that was. And so those who are listening, they're the light of the world, these people, these outcasts. They're the ones who are the city on the hill, not the chief priests on the actual city on the hill in Jerusalem where the temple is. No, it's you guys on this mountainside. There's no greater honor in the universe than being a follower of Jesus, so you need to shine. Verse 17, okay, listen. Do not presume that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. This is the key. One of a few key words in the book of Matthew is this word fulfill. And it means something a little bit different than probably we've grown up thinking. It doesn't just mean, okay, I've checked off the box of this prophecy. It's bringing something to robust fulfillment and understanding that we only half understood before. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, remember they're going to be renewed, so heaven and earth will pass away and will be renewed. Not the smallest letter or stroke of a letter shall pass from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what law means here. Until it is all accomplished. Therefore, Whoever nullifies one of the least of these commandments and teaches other people to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. This is the key to understanding what Jesus just did with the 10 Commandments and what he's about to do with a whole bunch of other stuff from the Torah. He's not throwing the Torah or the Nevi'im, the Torah being the first 5 books of the Bible, or the Nevi'im being all the prophets. He's not going to throw them away. He's going to fulfill them. Jesus has the wisdom, not just to memorize the laws and robotically do them, but to get at what the wisdom is behind the laws, what the intention is. The wisdom behind the Torah as taught by Jesus is what his listeners need to keep. He's saying, I'm going to teach you how to do this. I'm going to teach you how to do it right with God's heart. So how will this new group of followers be ranked in reputation? If Jesus' listeners fail to follow Jesus' insights on the Torah as expressed in the sermon to follow, which we're going to continue next week, then they're going to be on the bottom rung of this new kingdom group. But if they follow through, they're going to be of great reputation. So isn't it important to know how Jesus teaches us to follow the law? I think it is. Verse 20. For I say to you that unless you're doing right by God and others, far surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. So I think you get a clue now. What Jesus is talking about here is not just, going to heaven. He's talking about this kingdom of heaven thing that he's presenting to them right now. If you want to be a part of this, man, you're doing right by God and others has far exceed what these scribes and Pharisees are doing. Because they were so good at sticking to the letter of the law, but they have no idea or clue about what the laws are actually for doing right by God and others. And he's like, you have to take a completely different approach to be a part of the Jesus movement. I'm going to show you how that is. And then he gives some examples right now about what he means by it. First example. You ready for this? You have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not murder. And whoever commits murder shall be answerable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be answerable to the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing. I love this translation. You ever say that? You good for nothing. Don't say that. Shall be answerable to the highest court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty into the fiery hell. Yeah. Therefore, if you're presenting your offering at the altar and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar. Go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and present your offering. Come to good terms with your accuser quickly while you're with him on the way to the court so that your accuser won't hand you over to the judge and the judge of the officer. You won't be thrown into prison because truly I say to you, you will not come out of there until you've paid up the last quadrans. Save your quadrances. You have heard you shall not murder. Okay, you shall not murder is in a whole bunch of Bible passages, not just the 10 Commandments, but it's in Exodus 20:13, Deuteronomy 5, where it goes over the 10 Commandments. It's all over the place. He says, but I say to you, he's not saying it's okay to murder. He's not abolishing the Torah. Remember, he just made that very clear. He explains the deeper reason that murder is so awful. Murder is just the ultimate expression of an impure heart condition. Anger towards each other. Anger leads to murder. So the real enemy is anger. That's what has to be dealt with. So, well, I might be angry with everybody in my life, but I haven't murdered anybody yet. Jesus is like, no, you've missed the point. I'm not going to let you off the hook. If you think that way, you've missed the purpose of the Torah. You're heading to the same destruction as a murderer because it's happening. It's just happening in here. Yeah, I know. It's like, whoa. Verse 27. And you know what? You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Everybody loves this one. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Look, if your right eye is causing you to sin, just tear it out. Throw it away. And they're laughing too, listening to this, because he's using hyperbole. He wants them to laugh and be shocked, right? This is what you just experienced. That's what he intended. For it's better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand's causing you to sin, just cut it off. Throw it away from you. For it's better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than your whole body to go into hell. What is going on here? So, first thing is, just because you haven't actually cheated on your wife, it doesn't let you off the hook. And then I want you to just note that Jesus is talking to men. He's not addressing women. Have you noticed that? That's actually one of the keys to understanding this. Jesus is teaching about power plays and how men are supposed to look at women. It's a principle of wisdom. Obviously, women can learn from this too, but he's addressing the real issue at hand here, and this is men pulling power plays on women in their minds and their hearts. To look on a woman with lust, sexually fantasizing about a woman that it's inappropriate to do that with, it's not doing right by her, is it? Righteousness, doing right by God and others. This is not doing right by that woman because it degrades her to an object to your use. It degrades the woman that you've dedicated your life to, your wife, by despising the gift that she's given you. To lust after another woman, he's saying, guys, it's oppression in your heart. And this is important because remember, we're trying to be good tourists here. And what was it like in this day and time? This time in Jewish culture, a lot of the blame for lust was placed on women for being temptresses. Well, I lusted because how she looked, or dressed this way, she looked at me this way. And Jesus doesn't even address women here because he's redirecting the blame squarely on the men. This is upside down. Men are the ones who had all the power in this culture, and just, the superficial reading of the Torah without actually getting to the wisdom behind it, just even that taught men that they shouldn't abuse that power. But Jesus wants men to know that the wisdom behind the Torah went way beyond what a man does to a woman. It deals with how he thinks of a woman. So to lust after women breaks the second commandment, and the second part of the Jesus Creed, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus uses this trope of Gehenna, which is the word used here for hell, to make this point. This way of looking at others is from hell. It's from hell. And that's where it's going to return. Just don't go along for the ride. Everybody good? Okay, verse 31. Now it was said, whoever sends his wife away is to give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, so who's he talking to again here? Isn't that weird? It doesn't square with our culture, but there's a reason for it. Except for the reason of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Why in the world is it just to men? So it was said, what he's talking about here is this idea of the certificate of divorce. It's how Jewish rabbis interpreted passages in the Torah like Deuteronomy 22. And that Deuteronomy 22 is meant to protect women from the total vulnerability of being abused and discarded. So divorce in the ancient world, when a man divorced his wife was on her, she had no family to protect her. She had no, unless her father's family took her back, which wasn't a sure thing. I mean, she's like on her own and she's extremely vulnerable, and there were very few choices left open to her. This is a serious thing. It's like being left stranded on a desert island. So it's awful for a woman to be divorced. It goes beyond just, we broke up and now I'm with somebody else and I got a better job. And it's not that way in ancient times. So men, looked at this though and they said, well, I still want to be able to get rid of a woman if I don't like her anymore. So it says in Deuteronomy 22 As long as I give her a certificate of divorce, I can discard this woman and just do whatever I want. So, and Jesus believes they have totally misread the wisdom behind these laws. Divorced women are without recourse, without clan, destined to poverty, possibly death. And Jesus knew that the laws in Deuteronomy 22 are designed to prevent this. And they are looking for loopholes so they can do it anyway. And he says, except for sexual immorality, sexual sin like incest or adultery. So Jesus isn't telling men that there are no reasons for divorce at all, but the tradition of looking for excuses to oppress your wife by casting her out is just straight up evil. It's not what the law is intended to do. He's going to address this again in a future chapter. Verse 33. Again, you have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, don't take any oath at all, neither by heaven, for it's the throne of God, nor by the earth, for it's the footstool of his feet, nor even by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. Don't take an oath by your head. You can't make a single hair white or black, unless you've got just for men. But make your statement is yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond this is of evil origin. What's he talking about? Okay. Deuteronomy 23, verse 23 says, don't swear falsely. However, unscrupulous Israelites leveraged this by making oaths to prove that they weren't lying. So it's like, well, so you know that I'm not lying here. I swear by Jerusalem. But if they didn't make the oath, if they said, hey, I am not lying here. I'm telling you the truth here, but they didn't include the oath. It's like, crossing your fingers behind their back. It's like, I can't be held accountable for lying because I didn't say I swear by Jerusalem, or I swear by heaven, or I swear. They're not supposed to swear by God, so they invented other things to swear by. You see what I'm saying? So to say something without an oath, like crossing your fingers. Jesus cut through all of this nitpicking. He's like, you guys, you've missed the whole point of this law. It's to prevent lying, and you're looking for loopholes so you can lie. Just forget it. Speak the truth. Don't look for these loopholes. Verse 38. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I say to you, don't show opposition against an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other toward him also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go 2. Give to him who asks of you. Don't turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Okay, the eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing is not bad. It was incredible because in human society, ancient and modern, the idea is, look, if you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back 10 times harder, right? If you, steal, if you steal my car, I'm gonna take your house and your family and your pet dog. And, I'm just gonna make it so bad for you doing something, sort of bad to me that you'll never wanna do it again. And the Torah is like, no, you're not allowed to do that as my people. You cannot have any retribution that's bigger than what was done to you. So if someone steals your goat, you get a goat. That's it. You don't take, all his goats and then kill his family, which is kind of the way things worked back then. Can't do that. But what had happened here is that legalists had said, well, you stole my goat. I'd love to forgive you, and just because your family was starving, but the law says goat for goat, so you owe me a goat, even if you have to sell somebody into slavery. Was that the heart of this law? No, not at all. Jesus is like, let's get behind this law. Forgiveness is the law. He's like, just forgiveness is where I want you to go here. No more hiding behind technicalities to force personal justice. It's just totally radical subversion of the way humans normally behave. And finally, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. There is no law in the Bible that says this, but this is the way people talked. Yeah, I can love my neighbor like it says in Leviticus 19, but obviously enemies I can hate. I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may prove yourselves to be sons of your fathers in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you just love those who love you, what reward do you have? Even tax collectors, don't they do that? We're going to get to tax collectors later, by the way. Keeps bringing them up. And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Even the Gentiles, don't they do that? So be perfect or complete, just as your Father is. I want you to think of the enemies in Jesus' audience here. The enemies in Jesus' audience were not like a coworker that talked bad about you. These people's enemies were Romans who might have crucified your cousin last week. See what I'm saying? This is real enemies. And nobody was saying to love those people. Nobody. And Jesus is saying, no, this is not being a doormat. This is not just passively, well, I'll take whatever I can get. This is like being aggressive with love. It's saying, oh, you know, the Roman soldier comes over the hill and says, hey, you, Jew, carry this backpack for a mile. And you carry it for a mile, and it's like, all right. And you're like, you know what? I'd like to bring it to your camp. And if you need help unpacking, I can help with that too. That's not doormat. That's not retribution. It's something completely different, isn't it? It's mind-blowing is what it is. And so reflecting on this, everybody's minds are blown, like ours hopefully are. And Jesus is teaching us how to read and interpret the Bible here. Everything else should be seen through this lens. So he's not inviting us into what's the minimum that I have to do to follow Jesus and go to heaven. That question is just flawed. It's not that it's not important, but that's not what he's inviting us to ask. The real question is, how do I live as a Jesus follower? And I know we don't have much time, but I want to invite our table here if you have any reflections on this. Which, there's not much to reflect on, really. It's very simple stuff.
So I try to think how the reaction of these people were when they were listening to this. Because everything that they were thinking was one way. He was completely flipping it around onto them. And then how the men would, I'm sure when they walked away, they probably thought this guy is kind of crazy, right? Today, I was just going through, and the big thing that was hitting me that I was meditating on was that when he said, you are the light of the world.
Yes.
And how we have to have him in our heart all the time. And it's hard with everything that goes on in the darkness of this world and how we conform to the world around us, whether we're at work or we're at home just on the news and so forth. And it just, I reflected a lot on that in myself to see how I put myself out there, whether it be for people or I allow people to kind of get on my nerves at work or whatever the case may be, and how he would truly want me to be towards that person.
Yes.
And it keeps going back to you have to have Jesus in your heart. You have to have a soft heart.
Yeah.
And I went for a healing service a while back for some health issues. And 2 days later, during the time, I was having massive pain over my heart. And it came to me that I had to soften my heart before I could get healed in any other way.
Yeah.
And I had to release the issues I had with different people. And it was just like laundry list out for me on who I needed to call, who I needed to work through things. Because without that soft heart, I wasn't going to get anywhere else. I can listen to his word, I can come to church, but if my heart is hardened, I'm not going to truly get it.
Yeah,
that was a big reflection.
That is so true. And thank you. Thank you. And I know that I keep saying we're going to have question and response. We do that once in a while. I'm so sorry, but we do have men's and women's coming up next. And Mariette, maybe you want to close us out. But thank you guys have been awesome getting through this extensive notes with me. I love you guys.